All right, guys. So J.D. Vance went on CNN and did an interview with Jake Tapper here, and it got pretty heated. They were throwing down for a while. So let's start with this clip here.
Let me ask you, obviously, Trump's former chief of staff, General John Kelly,
Sure.
Was alarmed, he says, by what he heard when Trump said he wanted to use the National Guard or the Pentagon to go after the enemy within, Americans with whom he disagrees, including the Pelosi's, Adam Schiff. And then he gave an interview. He said that Trump, quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, that he's, quote, certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. You've called him a disgruntled former employee. But why shouldn't Americans out there listen to somebody who worked closely with Trump, worked with him longer than you've worked with him, retired four-star Marine general, served his country honorably, who is conservative, who says he agrees with Trump on most policies, but is worried about this aspect of Trump?
Before J.D. Vance answers, let me just point out to so-called independent media, take notes. I've been super hypercritical of mainstream media over the years. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the nightly news, etc. I've been super critical, and rightly so. But like when Rogan has Trump on and he plays patty cakes with him for 3 hours and he gives him a hot stone massage and he barely does any adversarial questions, the most you could say is there were some semi-adversarial questions, you are now in the political arena. Whether or not you want a responsibility, you now have a responsibility to get real answers on real questions about real policy stuff, right? We didn't get that. Now, so-called independent media is just new corporate media, and they play patty cakes with their preferred candidates, right? And so here's Jake Tapper, a guy I've been hypercritical of in the past. This is what a real question looks like. This is what it looks like. And it's pathetic that we're now looking at mainstream media doing better than independent media. What's supposed to be independent media, again, it's not. It's just new corporate media.
So first of all, a lot of what John Kelly, pretty much all of what John Kelly accuses Donald Trump of saying, there were other people in the room, Mike Pence's former chief of staff, for example, who've explicitly said Donald Trump never said those things, right? So one, on
Mike Pence, the guy who's not going to support Trump because...
Mike Pence's former chief of staff said that Donald Trump didn't say those things, right? So that's number one. Number two, I actually think there's an interesting conversation here to have, Jake, which is why does John Kelly not support Donald Trump? It's about policy. It's actually not about personality.
He says he agrees with Trump on most policy.
No.
He agrees with Trump on most policy. He disagrees with Trump on how Trump views his role and his and the fascism and the authoritarianism.
I don't buy that, Jake. I don't buy that, because if you actually look at John Kelly, at folks like Liz Cheney, the fundamental disagreement they have with Donald Trump is, even though they say that they're conservative in the sense that they want America to get involved in a ton of ridiculous military conflicts. They want America to police the world, and Donald Trump wasn't.
John Kelly lost a son in Afghanistan. Why are you saying that he, I've never heard John Kelly say whether he supports Iran or Afghanistan.
And I honor his son's sacrifice, and I honor his family's sacrifice. That doesn't mean he's not wrong about policy.
This is such bullshit. This is such weaselly bullshit from J.D. Vance. The idea that the reason Trump is pissed at Mark Milley and Mattis and John Kelly, the idea that that's over war, over foreign policy, is utter horseshit. He's mad because these are top 3 administration officials who came out and said, yeah, he's a fascist. He's a fascist. What do you want me to tell you? That's just who he is. He's an authoritarian. He believes he should have total control. That was their criticism. That was their criticism. And Trump is pissed at that. Trump's not pissed, Trump's anti-war and they're pro-war. Nonsense. If Trump's anti-war, why is he saying he wants Tom Cotton for Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State now? That guy's the most pro-war you can get. Why does he have Lindsey Graham advising him? He's as pro-war as it gets. Why is he still saying Mike Pompeo's a great guy? He was glazing him on Joe Rogan's show. That guy's as pro-war as it gets. That guy wanted to kill Julian Assange. This is such bullshit. J.D. Vance, let me make something very clear. J.D. Vance knows he's lying when he says this. He knows he's lying.
What has he said? Is your argument that a person who lost a son in Afghanistan can't be wrong about public policy?
I'm asking
then
you.
Why bring that up? Let's talk about public policy,
because
I've never criticized his service or his son's service.
I brought it up because you're acting as if he is pro-war, and I've never heard him say whether or not he supported the war in Afghanistan or the war in Iraq. He was a general carrying out orders.
Because I know John Kelly's worldview, and I know the people who have attacked Donald Trump the most vociferously on foreign policy. They'll say, well, he's a dictator, when what they really mean is they won't listen. Donald Trump wouldn't listen to the leadership of the military when they wanted him to start ridiculous conflicts. That is a consistent theme.
That is such fucking horseshit. That's such bullshit. He acts like Trump was anti-war. He wasn't anti-war. He increased drone strikes over 400%. He did over 2,000 drone strikes in his first 2 years as president. He kept us in Iraq. He kept us in Afghanistan. He bombed Syria twice. He bombed Somalia. He occupied a third of Syria to, quote, take the oil. That's his words, not mine. He assassinated General Soleimani, a top Iranian commander who was on the ground fighting ISIS. He ripped up the Iran agreement. What are you talking about? Oh, Trump really stood up to the deep state by doing fucking everything they want. He pardoned Blackwater war criminals who did the Nisour Square massacre. He had John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Gina Haspel in his administration. These are hardcore neocons. J.D. Vance knows he's in a corner. He knows there's no way out of it. So he uses his Ivy League intelligence to come up with a brazen lie and pretend like the disagreement Trump has with these guys is over foreign policy. No, it's not. It's that they call him an authoritarian. They have stories about he's authoritarian and how he's a fascist. And Trump doesn't like that because you're bad-mouthing him, right? That's all this is about. That's all this is about.
And I think that there's a big thing going on in American politics. It's a very interesting theme in American foreign policy where a lot of former members of the Pentagon bureaucracy, a lot of old neoconservatives, they have a fundamental difference with Donald Trump on the question of peace and war. I believe Donald Trump is the candidate of peace. I think the record supports that. But the reason these guys go after him so vociferously, I don't think that it's about his personality, Jake. I think that it's about they don't like that Donald Trump said no when a lot of them wanted to start a ridiculous war.
Well, you're ascribing worldviews, I think, based on gut. I can't really tell where you're coming from on it. There's no evidence.
Based on people that I've talked to in the Trump administration,
sure, John Bolton,
what John Kelly wanted to do, John Bolton, Liz Cheney, these people have a consistent...
John Kelly was at the Department of Homeland Security, and then he was chief of staff. He was not weighing in. I don't even know what...
Yeah, Trump is so principally anti-war that he's snuggling up to Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo for a second term, right? More, here we go.
I'll ask you something about John Kelly specifically, because you said the other day, quote, I guarantee John Kelly talked to somebody on Kamala Harris's campaign beforehand, before he did this interview. Now, I've spoken with people in John Kelly's circle, and I've spoken with people in the Kamala Harris campaign. They say there's been no communication the entire time. So where did that come from?
Oh, I'm highly skeptical of that, Jake. You know the way that these attacks work. You know the way that these people are often vetted by a campaign.
So you made it up
before something goes out there. No, I said that the American media and the American Democratic Party apparatus works a certain way. If it comes out that John Kelly never even spoke with a person in the Kamala Harris orbit, then I'm happy. You're telling me that based on secondhand conversations with John Kelly. And it's interesting. We've now spent, Jake, 3 minutes talking about John Kelly. If it is true that he never spoke with anyone in Kamala Harris's orbit, I'm happy to apologize to John Kelly for misstating how he delivered this news to the Atlantic magazine. But let's talk about who did he deliver this news to? To Jeffrey Goldberg, a guy who lied the United States into the Iraq War, which led to the deaths of millions of innocent Arabs and thousands of innocent Americans. You don't go to that guy if you don't have a particular ideological motive. I think that's what's going on. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to say that I'm wrong.
All of you idiots supported the Iraq War. All of you idiots supported the Iraq War. And now you virtue signal and pretend like you're against it. And you were against it at the time. You weren't. You weren't. You're using this as what you think is a get-out-of-jail-free card because people are correctly criticizing Trump from his administration, saying he's a fascist. He wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act against George Floyd protesters and rioters. And then he asked, why can't we just shoot them in the leg? He's now saying he wants to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Can you stop pretending, doing a bait and switch? Doing a red herring? That's actually why Trump is mad at those guys. Because he just cares so much about peace, bro.
It's interesting that you think that a magazine writer lied the American people into war.
Well, he encouraged it. He wrote stories that were dishonest.
He wrote a story about the gassing of the Kurds in I forget if it was the Atlantic or the New Yorker, but I'm actually referring to John Kelly talking to the New York Times.
He wrote stories, by the way, where he took what intelligence officials in the American Pentagon bureaucracy said and wrote it as the gospel truth. And this highlights the entire point that I'm making about Trump's foreign policy.
Well, why didn't he get out of Iraq? Why didn't he get out of Iraq? The stuff he's saying about Goldberg is right. But why, if Trump, Trump's so against these people, bro. Trump's so against these people, bro. He kept us in Iraq. So everybody was lied into the Iraq war, true. And then Trump got in there, realized how disastrous it was, and got out within the first month, right? Oh, no, that's right. He stayed there. He also stayed in Afghanistan. He stayed in Afghanistan, the one he virtue signaled the most about pulling out of. He stayed in there. He had some sort of deal with the leader that on a certain timeline, after he's gone, and then when Biden actually got out of there, all of a sudden, boom, Trump shitting on that relentlessly. And by the way, Trump has now flipped his position, and he openly says, I would have kept Bagram Air Base. Well, that means thousands of our troops are still in Afghanistan. That's not withdrawing. So Biden actually has the balls to follow through and pull out, and then you flip on it and start shitting on him. God, I hate these people so much. Holy shit, they're such liars.
This is a guy who wants to use American troops sparingly. He wants peace through strength. It's why his foreign policy was so successful during his first term. It's all the same people who were wrong about Iraq.
I can't. He just said Trump's foreign policy was so successful in his first term. Trump is one of the main reasons why we had October 7th. Let's be clear about that. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and he did the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords were nothing but buying off other Gulf Arab states to ignore Palestinians and put their middle finger up to Palestinians and say to them, nobody's ever coming to rescue you. You're going to be occupied from now until the end of time. Because Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem and did the Abraham Accords, that made Hamas go, oh, really? You're going to ignore us? Watch this. And they did October 7th. Trump allowed Israel to illegally annex the Golan Heights. That's Syrian territory. And Trump said, no, actually, now it's Israeli territory because I say so. He helped inflame the Middle East and blow it up. He ripped up the Iran agreement. That led to the war posture we're with on them now. Oh, God, he's such a liar. I can't fucking stand this guy.
They were wrong about the quagmire in Afghanistan. They were wrong about Syria. They were wrong about everything.
Then why does Trump bomb Syria twice? Trump's so anti-war and these guys are so pro-war, then why did Trump bomb Syria twice? Why did he admit we're occupying a third of Syria to, quote, take the oil? Does that sound like something an anti-war president would do? I'm going to stay occupying illegally a third of Syria to take the oil. JD, this guy is fucking shameless. He's shameless because, as I said, he knows every word out of his mouth is bullshit. He knows that. He doesn't care. He wants to be close to power. That's why he's doing this. The whole reason he was picked is because he said, I wouldn't have done what Mike Pence did. I would have done what Trump wanted. I would have not certified the election. That's why he was picked, because he's shameless. And he doesn't give a shit about telling the truth.
Now they're coming after Donald Trump because he actually has a realistic and cautious foreign policy.
I'm talking about people who worked for Donald Trump in his first administration. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not just John Kelly, but Mark Milley, who was the Trump-appointed chairman of the Joint Chiefs of
Who
Staff.
disobeyed Trump's direct orders on troop redeployments in Syria.
And I'm talking about the guy that had your job.
A massive violation of his constitutional oath, by the way.
I'm talking about the guy that had your job before Donald Trump's supportive crowd wanted to hang him, Vice President Mike Pence, who said, as you know, that Trump put himself before the Constitution. I'm talking about General Mattis, also Secretary of Defense in Trump's administration. I'm talking about Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense, who told me that Trump does have fascistic tendencies. John Bolton, H.R. McMaster, Melissa Farragut.
Okay, Jake, are you going to listen to every Trump administration official? You know, one reason why Kamala Harris doesn't have as many people criticizing her is because she doesn't fire people who fail.
A lot of these people weren't even fired. Some of them were, but a lot of them weren't. Again, the whole argument is it's just because Trump's so anti-war, that's why they hate him. Hey, JD Vance, have you said anything publicly about Trump saying he wants to start a war with Mexico in his second term? He wants to classify the drug cartels as a terrorist organization and then invade Mexico and do illegal airstrikes? Have you said anything about that? No, that would get in the way of your narrative of, oh, Trump's so anti-war, bro.
Of the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal is because Kamala Harris protects failure.
The disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. See, this is what they do, guys. This is how weaselly these assholes are. The whole time he's posturing, oh, I'm anti-war, Trump's anti-war, Trump's anti-war. Oh, the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. The way people talk about that war, understand something. The implication of everybody who criticizes that war is we shouldn't have gotten out. We shouldn't have gotten out. They'll back off that if you press them on it, but that's the implication of everything they say. Oh, bro, it was so bad. This fucking withdrawal was horrible, and this bad thing happened, and that bad thing happened, and that bad thing happened, bro. We shouldn't have never let this happen, bro. Okay, so what does that mean? We should have stayed. That's what it means.
Donald Trump fires them, and I'd much rather have the president who fires people who screw up. Now, Jake, no, this is an important point.
Kamala Harris. You did not fire Mike Pence.
Kamala Harris.
He did not fire Mark Milley.
Kamala Harris.
He did not fire John.
He fired a lot of those people, Jake, and he did because they weren't doing their job. But this is the thing, Jake. We've now spent 5 minutes talking about people in Donald Trump's staff
who think he's not fit for office.
He fired. Who think he's not fit for office. Oh, they didn't think he was unfit for office until they had a falling out with him because he fired them. And we're not talking about the public policy. Well, we're actually talking about how Americans can't afford groceries. We're actually talking about the fact that Americans can't afford the cost of housing. Can we talk about the fact that a lot of people out there in Erie, Pennsylvania, they're the ones who suffer and die when people like Mark Esper and Mark Milley don't obey the commander-in-chief's orders.
Sorry, I forgot I was on air there for a second, and I started listening on double speed. My bad. I'll go back to 1.25.
Now, Donald Trump and what he says.
Yes.
And Donald Trump says.
And you'd much rather talk about what Donald Trump allegedly said than what Donald Trump did in office. What he did in office, Jake,
what he said publicly.
1.5% inflation.
The military to go after the enemy within, which is the American people.
He did not say that, Jake.
The enemy
he
within?
said that he was going to send the military after the American people. Show me the quote where he said that.
He said the enemy within.
He said far left lunatics. He's talking about people
Pelosi's.
rioting.
I love how he thinks that's okay. Define far left lunatic, JD Vance. Who do you think Trump means when he says, I'm going to go after the enemy within and it's far left lunatics? Who does he mean? Who does he mean? He means like anybody who's not hardcore MAGA, anybody who's maybe protesting on an issue where he disagrees. He literally cites Democratic politicians that he calls far-left lunatics, and across the board, these are not far-left lunatics. They're total corporate centrist Democrats, right? So no, he just wants to go after people who really disagree with him. Oh, okay. I guess that's fine then.
He's talking about people rioting after the election.
Oh my God.
Pelosi's were rioting after.
In one of the clips, Trump makes very clear. He's like, the biggest problem we have, it isn't even the illegals. It isn't even the illegals. It's the enemy from within. It's the far-left lunatics. It's Pelosi. It's Schiff. He cites everybody, like the non-MAGA people. They're the enemy within. We're going to go after them, right? The idea that, oh, bro, he means dot every I and cross every T and do an official investigation and find serious crimes and then go after those serious crimes. No, he doesn't like criticism. This is why he sued CNN for $475 million because they called his election denialism the big lie. By the way, that got laughed out of the courtroom. The case was thrown out. This is why he says we should de-license all of the media shows that go after Trump. He says de-license them. God, J.D. Vance is such a weasel. I think we can wrap it up there. We don't need to listen to anymore, but they go on and they keep yelling at each other. And J.D. Vance autistically tries to make the argument that, bro, everybody who said anything negative about Trump is just because they're a warmonger. And he's like a peacenik, bro. That's what that is. And Tapper's pulling his hair out like, no, their criticisms are specifically over him being an authoritarian, him being a fascist, him wanting to deploy the U.S. military against American citizens. Like, that's what the criticism is. Stop pivoting, stop obfuscating, stop deflecting, stop lying. This is the bone they have to pick with him. And J.D. Vance just keeps saying, no, that's not it. It's because he's a peacenik, even though he's not, and they're pro-war. I got bad news for you, JD. They're all pro-war. Everyone you're talking about is pro-war. That's the sad reality. But I don't know if this is working on anybody, but I hope to God it's not, because this is just lying to protect an authoritarian, because that's what he signed up for. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.